Welcome to another edition of Choice Cuts. I am Ryan Turek, your host and the managing editor of ShockTillYouDrop.com. I'd like to introduce Jeffrey Reddick. How are you, Jeffrey?
I'm good, Ryan. How are you?
Jeffrey is a Hollywood screenwriter, a very successful one at that, I might add. You would say that, yes?
Some would say that.
Yeah. Come on, you're making a living writing, you know?
Yes.
A particular horror franchise hit its fifth mark this year.
Yes.
One that you helped get off the ground.
Yes.
And I kind of wanted to trip down memory lane and discuss this franchise called Final Destination.
Yes, absolutely.
Which makes a buck off of killing lots of kids.
In very creative ways.
In very creative ways. In some respects, I consider, I've always considered kind of the Saw franchise as the new Nightmare on Elm Street for the new generation, because you have kind of something at its core, kind of a meaty mythology at its core, and a killer who is very recognizable and has something to say and is very creative.
Right.
Final Destination I always considered as kind of like the Friday the 13th of the new generation.
Like
Yeah, I mean, come on. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. I mean, it's all about the kills.
Yeah.
You know, it really is when it comes down to it. People love going to see the kills. Granted, there's no serial killer or mass maniac at the center of it all. What I think, Final Destination has over it is you never see who this killer is.
Right.
You never see the, death, which is great.
Yeah.
Well, let's start. I mean, I wanted to ask you, first off, what did you think of Final Destination 5?
I love the fifth one.
Yeah.
Loved it.
Yeah.
I think they went back to basics in a way, but it felt like they actually made this one for the fans.
Yeah.
Bringing Tony Todd back was amazing. I thought the focus on this story and having adult characters and a couple of the twists, no spoilers, were brilliant.
Yeah.
So I thought it was a really, really good film.
Now, did they kind of let you in on where they were taking the story?
I'm still in touch with Craig Perry, who's the producer. He's been kind of like the shepherd of the project through all five. He's a great guy, and we stay in touch, and so he kind of lets me know what they're thinking, what they're doing, and bounces ideas off of me and stuff. So I knew the twist going in.
Okay, all right.
But I didn't tell anybody.
I always like asking people at what point during the Final Destination 5 did they kind of get a clue as to what was happening, or where it was going. I always liked seeing their reaction.
Yeah.
Because that was a blast. That was the best part of it.
Yeah.
Well, let's go back. Where did Final Destination come from for you? Was it, one of those kind of spec scripts that was sitting around?
No. Actually, let me go back to the beginning. I was born the son of I was a coal miner's daughter growing up. No, I'm kidding. That's too far back. I was trying to get an agent. I worked at New Line Cinema in New York. I actually worked there for about 11 years, and I was trying to get a TV agent. I started off acting, decided that my agent told me I wasn't. Quit laughing. I was a good actor, damn it.
I've known Jeffrey for quite a while, so this is the first I've heard that.
What a rude host.
No, not at all.
But no, my agent told me I was an ethnic Michael J. Fox type, and didn't know what to do with me because I didn't rap or play basketball. And
oh man,
no, she didn't. She just said if you rapped or played basketball, like we could.
You
put
could
you
pinpoint
stuff.
that.
Yeah, and the Cosby Show was going off the air, so I knew my acting career was doomed because that was the only show I got on.
Yeah.
So I decided to write. Was trying to get an agent, and they want you to write a spec script for something that's on TV. So the X-Files was really hot at the time, and so I used the concept behind Final Destination as an episode of the X-Files. And we actually it got me an agent, but we never submitted it to the show or anything like that, but it got me an agent. And one of my friends at New Line's like, that's a great idea, you should turn that into a feature. So I wrote up like a 7 or 8 page treatment for a story, and I hooked up with Craig Perry and Warren Zide through J.C. Spink and Chris Bender, who I'd worked with Chris Bender at New Line. Yeah. And we developed it, and Warren Zide and Craig Perry had a first deal at New Line. We went back and forth with them for like 8 months because at first all the characters in my take were adults, and then they wanted to make them high school because that was popular. There
was a kind of the zeitgeist of Scream and disturbing behavior and all those movies.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And but it was really hard to get them to sign on with death as a killer. Like they're like, this doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But when Craig and Warren said they were going to, if New Line passed again, they were going to go to other studios. New Line bought it. And then I wrote the first draft of the script, and then we went out to directors and got James Wong and Glenn Morgan from the X-Files.
Yeah.
And
which is kind of a weird coincidence,
it's a weird, circle. Yeah, it is. It was. I was very excited when they first came to me and they said, "Hey, we were thinking about going to these guys from the X-Files. What do you think?" I'm like, "They're amazing. I love their stuff." So I was really excited when they came on board.
Can you talk a little bit more about your X-Files episode? Like what was going on? How did Mulder and Scully get into this predicament?
Scully had a brother, Charles, that you never really saw.
Yeah.
There was one brother that showed up a couple times, but Charles never showed up.
Yeah.
So I wanted to kind of make it a really personal episode. So basically Charles was the one that had the premonition. And then the people who got off the flight started dying, and people started thinking that Charles was behind the murders.
Yeah.
And it was a really kind of emotional episode. The difference between that and the script was that in the X-Files episode, people that had near-death experiences at the same time as like a catastrophic event would come back. Like they would flatline and come back with like a demon or death inside of them.
Yeah.
And they would be going around killing people.
Gotcha.
And so, by the end of the episode, Scully was thinking about quitting the X-Files because it's like all my family has been like through hell because of this. And it was a really good script. Like I was really happy with it. But I had a friend, Mark Kaufman at New Line Cinema, who's still there, doing well. He just kept saying, this is a great idea. Like, this should be a feature. And I'm very glad I listened to him.
Now, what was kind of the state of New Line at the time that you had brought, at the time that was getting set up over there?
New Line, it had started to get corporate by that point. Like, Warner Brothers had already kind of taken over in a way. So it was still a great place to work, but it had gotten a lot more corporate. Like, there were more people you had to check into outside of the kind of New Line family to make big decisions. So there was a little bit more aversion to risk. That's why I think that not having a real killer was a thing. And actually, in my first draft of the script, they had me like give Death form in like the final fight. Like you didn't see it throughout the whole movie, but then you kind of saw the specter in the final kind of clash between the hero and Death.
One of the things that was great about the Final Destination DVD, and this was just kind of at the cusp of when DVD was starting to get off the ground, was to kind of give you a little bit of insight into the test screening process. I remember specifically there was a special feature on that disc that had Bob Shea talking about, well, this was the ending of Final Destination, but things were altered after a certain test screening or something like that. Were you privy to that? Like, were you in there for the test screening?
I went to some of the test screenings and definitely knew all I worked in marketing the last 5 years I was at New Line, so I was definitely involved in like the marketing campaign and stuff. And test screenings can be annoying, definitely. But I actually do think, in the case of Final Destination, that the test screening probably helped the movie because when you go to see a horror movie, you want to leave the movie with like a thrill. Not unfortunately. I mean, that's just the way it is. You want to kind of go out on a high note, and as emotionally resonant and nice as I thought the original ending was, it kind of left people feeling a little kind of flat when they left the theater. So I think you needed that kick at the end, and that's kind of the standard of horror movies anyway. So I think it worked. But the funny thing is, like, that's almost happened on I think every one of the films, except I'm not sure about the last one, where they'll write an ending and then they'll go and shoot a bigger ending, and it's like, well, why don't you just write the bigger ending? I don't know. Just save yourself.
Aiming low, just in case.
Save yourself a little time and just make a big explosion.
Big explosion.
Big explosion.
Now, clarify for me, what was your participation on 2?
Well, for 2, because I got the first movie set up as a treatment, this was kind of back in the old days where I was thinking more strategically how to get a movie made, and so I know that there were so many hurdles that I always thought if you can get a producer involved at the story level and get them invested, they'll fight harder for it at a studio level. Things have changed even since then, but that was kind of my MO back in the day.
Yeah.
And so I wrote a treatment for the sequel, and typical kind of Hollywood, they went to every other writer in the world looking for scripts and ideas and stories, but they ended up coming back to my story, and they had been working with Eric Bress and J. Mackey Gruber on a project, and really wanted to work with them as well. And I was working on the Return to Cabin by the Lake at the time, and they were like, well, we'll make you an executive producer on the sequel. We want to buy your story.
Right.
We want to bring these guys on to write the script. And I actually think that was a brilliant idea because my story, while a lot of it's still in there, was more tonally the same as the first one. Like, it was just more somber and contemplative. And I think the reason Part 2 works so well is it takes the stuff that I had that kind of expanded the mythology from the first movie, kind of connected all the characters, and you saw there was a bigger picture. But Eric Bress and J. Mackey Gruber just brought the splatter and the fun, and I think that makes it. Otherwise, it would have felt too much like a copy, I think, of the first film.
Absolutely, yeah,
So,
and you can't beat that opening either. I mean, that opening is pretty terrific. I mean, the plane plays on a lot of primal fears, you know. But when you take it down to ground level, there's so much more you could play with in terms of accidents and stuff. But that is just perfect. I thought that was terrific.
I grew up in Kentucky, and we literally could not think of an opening for that scene. I had a apartment complex fire, like kids going to spring break at first, And they actually, New Line used that for the comic book, which was funny. I didn't know that until I read the comic. I was like, hey, that's my opening. But I was driving home one time. Actually, the whole idea for Final Destination came when I was flying home to Kentucky, and then I was at home in Kentucky behind a log truck, and I called Craig up. I'm like, what about a fucking log truck? He's like, that's awesome. So, yeah, and David Ellis just did that whole, it's one of my favorites.
The
choreography is just amazing. So.
Yeah, and you bring up the comic book. Yeah. I think a lot of people forget that there was a Final Destination comic book at one time.
Yeah.
And there was also a novel. There was also like some novels.
Yeah.
Were you at all asked to come in on those?
You know what? I wasn't. That was a weird time because I'd moved out here and I was really focusing on writing. So they never really. I didn't even know that the books had come out until my agent called and said, since you created the franchise, they have to give you money for the books.
Final Destination 3 comes along. Were you a little bit more distant or closer than as like the previous films?
You know what? I wasn't actually really involved in the subsequent ones, like 3 and 4. Really, I wasn't involved in 5 really. I just talked to Craig Perry more. They used me on the first 2, and then they used James and Glenn on the first one, and then the third one, and then they went back to David Ellis and Eric Bress for the fourth. So it's kind of a weird like. It's always interesting how they
it almost seemed like they were trying to figure out what clicked,
right. Right.
But I mean, I think that 5 definitely picks the series back up.
Yeah.
3 was fine. I think there was a lot of decent kills in 3. 4, and Craig knows this. I mean, I told him I think it's kind of a little bit of a misstep, but I think they really picked it back up for the 5th one.
Yeah. It feels like they made it for the fans. Like it feels like a respectful genre piece. And
you had a cool
franchise.
title credit card on the
the one that blew up and bloody and glass.
Yeah,
I didn't see it. What are you talking about?
It's in 3D. Now, is Craig keeping you in the loop on potential future installments, or?
You know what? We're not. I think domestically it didn't do as well as the other ones, but foreign it did amazing. So I think the total box office is really good. So I think that they might. They've said after the second, like it's always a weird situation. Like they always say after the last one, we're not sure if we're doing another one. I'm like, well, it did well. I mean, come on, this is
foreign box office is always where it counts these days.
Like, and this is Hollywood. It's like if it makes over $100 million, why wouldn't you make another one? But I think they might wait. I think that 4 did so well and 5 didn't do as well as 4 did. So I think they were like, well, maybe I think we came out maybe too quick with the sequel, which they probably did. They probably rushed it out.
Yeah, maybe they should have called Part 4 the Final Destination.
Yeah, but that's stupid.
I know it's par for the course. I mean, they do that in Friday the 13th. It was like the final chapter. Oh no, it's not.
And my thing is, if you're going to do that, then do something to tie. Like at least with the final chapter, they kind of tied up Jason's storyline. Where of course,
it was a whole arc.
But they totally ignored it. Yeah. But in the next one, it's like lightning will bring him back, and then we'll have a fake guy. So if you're going to do a final, you kind of need to this last one would have made it good. They could call that one the final, and it would have been cool.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess what I'm asking is, do you have any ideas for how to maybe bring it, kind of revive the franchise a little bit more?
I always have ideas on how to revive the franchise. It's
whether somebody's listening.
It's really a matter of. There's you know how the studios are. They don't want to change a formula or something, and they're like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what happens when sequels go on for too long. Is people kind of come up with like one twist on the formula, and the rest of it's just formula, and people kind of get sick of it after a while.
Yeah.
So I've got some ideas on how to take it kind of in a different direction, because my thing is like, Death can have a new design. Like it doesn't have to be the same exact way of, it's very simple. You've set up that rule, so just. But I think if they were willing to kind of go in a different direction, I would definitely love to come back. If they just want to make the same movie over and over again, like I've got a couple other horror projects I'm working on that I would rather focus on. But it was kind of fun to see my name explode.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe I'll sell out and just say, all right, whatever. Cheerleader, Death at cheerleader camp.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about just some industry talk really quick. You know, I mean, you've been out here working hard. You said you worked at New Line at a very young age, so you're getting kind of insider information and seeing the machinations of how the system works.
Yeah.
How have things changed? Is it easier? Is it tougher for a screenwriter?
It's harder on one level, but it's easier on another level. Like back in the old days, there was a long period when I was younger where they were going crazy, just spending development money, buying scripts, and they would be like, "Oh, we like the concept of the script, but we don't like any of the script, so we'll buy it and then work on it and hire 5 writers to rewrite it." And those days have gone, unfortunately. well, that may be fortunately. But but it's been replaced by this really risk-averse kind of attitude where studios would much rather make a sequel or a remake than take a chance on something original.
Yeah.
And that's made it harder. What I tell writers when I speak to them, I don't want to sound.
Well, you do conferences and stuff like that.
But when I speak to them, I say your goal shouldn't be to write a studio film.
Yeah.
Because the studio films are mostly sequels, remakes, huge tentpole. Like they're going to go with the safe A-list writer who's had, because their thinking is if we bring 5 A-list writers who had hit movies onto this project to rewrite it, it's going to get better. Mm-hmm. And if it fails, then we can say, hey, we had 5 A-list writers on there. It's not our fault it failed. Like they can pass. Like that's kind of the mentality. But the really good news is now because of digital, and people can go out and make their own movies. You can shoot a movie for $50,000 on digital and have it look amazing and just have that be your calling card for your writing or your directing or your acting or whatever your skill set is. I think that's opened up so many other doors that have kind of are filling the vacuum that the kind of the studio route has made.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's just been from what I've seen. Like it's when people say go out and make your own damn movie, it's like do it.
Yeah.
Like that's.
It seems like the gist around town is, either go and make your own thing or have a script that's so polished and so ready to go and it has everybody attached.
But it needs attachments. Like that's the thing is like you need to like an actor or a director, and you can't get an actor attached to a script unless you have an offer, and you can't make an offer unless you have money, but you're not going to get money. So it's like this whole catch-22 strangeness.
See, free advice, and we didn't have to go to the conference.
Oh yeah.
Or
you can send your money
to. Well, what's your status now? I mean, you said you're working on a bunch of projects and stuff like that. What do you have in the pipeline that you can talk about?
It's so funny. Like in the last month, there have been some movement on a couple of projects. I had a project over at Gold Circle that's in turnaround, supernatural thriller that I'm really excited about that we've got interest in now, and another script that I went out with at the end of November of last year. I'm trying to get a directorial debut off the ground, and I originally had some people behind a supernatural one that was very Nightmare on Elm Street-ish in tone, but I'm trying to get this urban slasher film off the ground because I think that the Latino and African-American audience for horror is so huge.
Yeah.
But every time the studio tries to make a movie for them, they're like, let's put a leprechaun in the hood, or let's throw a vampire in the hood, or let's send somebody to the barrio, and it's ridiculous. Yeah. So, I want that to kind of be like my directorial debut because I think there's not just because there's a market, it's just underserved.
Yeah.
And I think horror fans, people I talk to are saying, well, will the white horror fans come see a horror movie? I'm like, they're not. Of course, if it's a good horror movie,
it's a good story.
Yeah, that's all they want: a good story and good characters and good kills. I know it's There's a lot of dumb people out there.
Colors, man. It doesn't matter in horror. Jeez. As long as it's red. That's one unified color for everybody.
I need to know that one. That's a good one. All they care about is red.
Yeah, Jesus. Well, very cool, man. Well, good luck with everything.
Thank you.
Congratulations on, all your success. And
thank you. Well,
it's good to know you, Jeffrey.
Good to know you too, buddy.
All right, man. Well, thanks for coming on the show. I appreciate
pleasure.
it. And that wraps up this episode of Choice Cuts. Thanks again. You can find Shock Till You Drop on Facebook at facebook.com/ShockTillYouDrop.